Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas, on a rainy day here in Dallas, Texas, Monday, April the 10th. We'll be chatting in a few minutes with our friend Bill Katz, the editor of Urgent Agenda. Tonight, we're going to be focusing a great deal on foreign policy. There is a lot going on. It's a very dangerous world as we do our show today. You've got Syria, you've got Russia, you've got Iran, China, North Korea, and in the middle of all of this, President Trump. And of course, a lot of the reaction to the attack last week or Thursday night against that Syrian air base. So there's just a lot of stuff going on foreign policy. Egypt is also an issue. Just lots and lots of stuff going on in the area of foreign policy. It seems like everything has all of a sudden just jumped to the front page when it comes to foreign policy. The role of Congress, of course, is always a big question mark when we do these things. A lot of members of Congress, I think, have been pretty responsible, accepting the idea that President Trump has the authority to attack Syria. It could become a little bit more problematic for President Trump if we escalate beyond this attack, and that's something that we'll be watching over the next few weeks. You know, I was thinking this afternoon, I was out at a meeting this afternoon, and I said to my friend, you know, a year ago, if I had said to you a year ago, April 10th, 2016, that on April 10th, 2017, a Republican president would be appearing at the swearing in of a man like Neil Gorsuch as the Supreme Court justice, I think most of us a year ago would have been thrilled. We'd be saying what a tremendous 60, 70 days the Republican president is having. Well, that's what happened today. We have a new justice, a wonderful man. And I got to say congratulations to Senator McConnell for really managing this thing. It was in February of 2016 that Justice Scalia passed away. And 14 months later, we have a replacement for Justice Scalia in the name of Gorsuch. So great job by Senator McConnell. Susan Rice has been in the news here lately, way too much in the news. She has a problem telling stories, and the latest controversy, of course, has to do with exactly what weapons did Syria have or didn't have. So we have a lot to get into with Bill, and let's say hello to Bill Katz, the editor of Urgent Agenda. How are you, Bill?
Oh, just fine, Silvio. I was very delighted to watch the swearing in of Justice Gorsuch today. It was a great moment, a Scalia moment. And, you know, it's always inspiring to see the swearing in of any Supreme Court justice because they are the highest judges in the land, but particularly one as well qualified as he. And I also noted the fact that the entire Supreme Court showed up, which is not often the case in these swearings in. I look forward to great things from him. I also think that people are already speculating that there will be at least one other Supreme Court opening this year. There is an expectation, it's not confirmed, that Justice Kennedy, for whom Justice Gorsuch once clerked, will be retiring at the end of this session. If that is the case, then obviously President Trump will have another opening to fill, and with no filibuster facing him. So that should be a relatively easy task.
What do you think of the conversation I was having with my friend this afternoon about a year ago? If we were sitting a year ago, 2016, and we had said that this seat would remain open for 14 months and that it would be filled by a man like Neil Gorsuch, I would have felt pretty good a year ago, Bill, if you had told me that. So I mean, this is a big deal for President Trump, I think.
It is. The Democrats, of course, are very bitter. They felt that this should have been their seat, that the opening occurred in the last year of the Obama administration with the death of Justice Scalia. And President Obama, as you recall, nominated Merrick Garland, who, by the way, is a very fine man. It was a distinguished appointment. But the Republicans said, no, there's a long tradition that we don't confirm Supreme Court justices in presidential election years, and that is true. That is, it's gone back 80 years. And they stalled it, and we got to a Republican administration and Neil Gorsuch. I think that depending on what happens in the future, it is possible that if there's an opening, I suspect President Trump will appoint another conservative. That is something that would have to occur rather quickly, because I'm not at all certain that the Republicans can hold the Senate in next year's midterms. We hope they can. The Democrats have a lot of seats that are exposed next year, but traditionally the party in power in the White House loses seats in the midterm elections. The Republicans only have a 2-seat majority in the Senate, and it will not be difficult for them to lose control of the Senate, in which case, if there's a Supreme Court opening afterward, there will have to be some compromise with Democrats. So
right.
I hope that the president gets his openings before the 2018 elections.
Isn't it interesting, Bill, this point you just mentioned, isn't it interesting how 2 or 3 months ago it was a given that the Republicans would pick up Senate seats in 2018?
Yes.
And now here we're talking about, you're exactly right. In the first year, in the first midterm of any president, he usually takes a beating. I think the only exception was President Bush in 2002, who actually gained the Senate. I think he was only one down. I think it was a 50-50 tie or whatever. But he actually did gain the Senate that year. But most of the time they lose seats, like you're saying. And yes, the Republicans, even though they have a lot of advantages, history is against them in that respect, Bill.
It is, and we should point out that even in the midterm election, where by all logic the president in power should have gained seats, which was the 1942 midterms, coming less than a year after Pearl Harbor, President Roosevelt took a beating, and this was during a conflict in which the country was united. A victory was on everybody's lips, and yet the commander-in-chief lost a number of seats in 1942. It is the usual tendency of the country to turn against the very person they've elected as president, the contrariness of the democratic system. But let's see what happens. It's still a long way off. President Trump, I think, is feeling the presidency for the first time. I think his handling of the Syria situation was brilliant. He has good people around him, and you never know. A year from today, we can be talking about a president with a pretty good approval rating, or a president whose approval, or a president whose approval rating is no worse than any other at that point.
Yeah, things are so unpredictable in this business that you're exactly right. Who knows what will happen? Who would have predicted, for example? I don't want to get too historical here, but who would have predicted in March or April of 2009 that the Republicans would have the kind of comeback they had in 2010? I certainly didn't predict that. So
right.
These things have a way of changing. They're so unpredictable. But before we get to foreign policy, why don't we continue with the Democrats for a minute? The Democrats, they would have to hold on to just about everything they have. West Virginia, Missouri, Montana, one of the Dakotas. They would really have to hold on to those seats that where Republicans usually win. But it seems to me the Democrats are very discredited with most of the country, not their base, but with most of the country after the Gorsuch nomination, because I thought their performance was just absolutely despicable. They could have voted against him. That's one thing. But to try to, do the filibuster and all the crap that we heard about Gorsuch, who's a fine human being, I just, they didn't make. It wasn't the best that the Democrats could have done, Bill. I don't know how anybody can feel very proud of the job that they did, Bill.
They have no reason to feel proud, but the Democratic leadership today seems to be completely under the control of what they politely call their base. How big that base is, I don't know. It seems to be the people who shout the loudest. And they are leftists. They're not liberals anymore. They're leftists. They're mean-spirited, and their instruction to their leaders is go against anything Trump is for, or else there will be real consequences down the line. We'll run primary candidates against you. This is the old move on crowd. They're to the left of Hillary Clinton. They're really to the left of, I think, Schumer, who is the minority leader of the Senate, is running particularly scared because he is not the kind of person they like. And so he went along with it, because Chuck Schumer is a very ambitious man. But one of the things we've learned about the left, in fact, we've talked about it on this program, is you can't satisfy them. It's 100%. You must give them 100% of the time. And so this might actually get worse. The Democrats, there was some Democratic support, I have to concede, for the strike on Syria. Some of the shrewder Democrats, understanding what the situation was, did give some limited support. But that, I have what I call the 48-hour rule, that no matter what event occurs, it takes 48 hours for the left to reorganize and go right back to their old party line. And that's pretty much what's happened. Now that 48 hours has passed and more since the Syria strike, you now hear the voices of the left starting to emerge that Trump is a warrior, doesn't have the experience, this and that. It's interesting, though, that he's gone up very strongly against Russia. And now what are they going to say? Because the whole Democratic Party's reason for existence was apparently to expose some deep love between Putin and Trump. Now, that's ludicrous right now because Trump is being very harsh on Putin, and Putin is being very harsh on Trump. So, where does the Democratic go with the Russia thing now? It goes nowhere. What is interesting, though, is that Trump's first major action, as opposed to the routine things like appointing people, in policy was the Syria strike. And it was done very quickly, very efficiently, in a very limited way. It sent a very powerful message, though, that we have a new president and a new kind of president in the White House. And I'd be fascinated to see what happens now down the line.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking about that in a minute because I want to spend a lot of time talking about this very complicated world. But just one more thing about the Democrats and Senator Schumer. I think if I was Senator Schumer and these, as you call them, the base, I don't think they're really the base. I think it's an extreme part of the Democrat Party, but they make a lot of noise and contribute a lot of money, which is probably why they have so much influence. But I think if they were to walk into my office, I would say to them, look what you made me do. I had to give up the 60 votes against Gorsuch, and now the next time we have to fill a seat, I'm not going to have the 60 votes to work with. So, you basically put us in a weaker position, and I would argue that with people in the base. They won't understand it, but nevertheless, I really do think the Democrats are in a weaker position because of that 60-vote rule, and I wouldn't be surprised if that goes out the window altogether, not just for judges, Bill.
It's quite possible, and you're absolutely right. I'm sure that Schumer deep down would love to tell the base, look what you made me do. You put us in a weaker position. But the kind of base the Democratic Party has right now doesn't care. They are much more interested in making ideological points than in winning. And to them, Chuck Schumer is a despicable character. He represents the more thoughtful liberal wing of the Democratic Party. They're not interested. These are real hardline ideologists. The Republican Party has the same thing, by the way. They have their right-wing Tea Party group in the party, the Freedom Caucus, which can also be very difficult to work with because they are rigid ideologists, and that's not what makes government go.
No, not at all. It's very difficult to govern with these minorities that do not understand that the only reason they're the majority, the only reason the Freedom Caucus members can get good committee assignments is because there's a bunch of Republicans who were elected with 51, 52% of the vote. That's why we have a majority, not because of the Freedom Caucus.
That's right.
If it was up, the Freedom Caucus is, I hate to compare them this way, but ideologically, or not ideologically, but in the sense of being in the extreme, they're a lot like, for example, the Black Congressional Caucus, which is basically an extreme part of the party that by itself would never create a majority, but they do say no to everything. And I think the Freedom Caucus, to some extent, will do the same thing. I think they were responsible for the bill not coming out of Congress, although that in retrospect may not have been such a bad idea considering how Obamacare is imploding. We're going to take a little break, Bill. When we come back, I want to talk about Dr. Susan Rice, and I want to talk about all this foreign policy, which is it is really unsafe out there. It is really an unsafe world. We'll be right back.